A video of Donald Trump went mega viral over the weekend and caused an explosion of online debate and discussion, and I'm going to play it for you in just a moment. But before doing that, I just want to say, you may have seen this already because it was so talked about over the weekend. Just wait, I have something in store for you that's much more important afterwards. So if you're ever going to stick around for a full segment, let it be this one. A pretty devastating series of things to go through for Trump a little bit later, emphasizing just how awful and dangerous he is. But first, here's what Trump had to say over the weekend during a speech. And while you're watching it, please make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. It just takes a little click and the like button and the alert bell, but especially subscribe. Here's the video.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. A friend of mine.
Now, this caused responses from both sides like I've rarely seen before. Of course, it was reported on as him saying there's going to be a bloodbath if he's not elected. Then MAGA World jumped in, saying, no, that's not what he was saying. He was saying a bloodbath for the auto industry or for the economy. Now, when I watched that clip, obviously the bloodbath comment does come within the context of a discussion about the auto industry, which, side note, Trump is really wrong about. But he also keeps repeating the phrase, and this is the chilling part, that will be the least of it, about what would happen to the auto industry, again, that he's wrong about. And I saw someone respond to that clip saying the tough thing about how Trump speaks is he's so incoherent and has such horrible grammar. Everything is so fractured as he's trying to articulate his thoughts that sometimes it's hard to tell what he's saying when. But in this case, I think it's fair to have as a takeaway that he's saying the auto industry wouldn't do well under a second Biden term, but then goes, well, actually, that would be the least of it because there would be a bloodbath for the country if he's not elected. The auto industry stuff, again, would be the least of it, he kept saying. And that's frightening for sure. And by the way, even if he was just talking about an economic bloodbath, is also ridiculous, given that Biden has overseen an economic recovery and current economic performance that Trump could never dream of. But do you know what's the most important takeaway? Either way you perceive the clip, it doesn't change a thing. Because I also do understand some people saying, maybe that was him referring to the auto industry because he was just talking about that exclusively, or the economy at large, like I said. I understand saying it's not certain that he was saying an actual bloodbath, even though he uses violent, dangerous language like that constantly. Okay, cool. So for the rest of this discussion, let's just operate on the assumption that that clip, the bloodbath part of it, was taken completely out of context. And all these reports, again, I don't think it was. Genuinely, I've watched way too many hours of Trump speak and how he does that sort of, we're talking about the auto industry, but that's going to be the least of it because if you really think about it, if I'm not elected, there's going to be a bloodbath. Merging those two thoughts, again, his brain bouncing all around constantly. But to those who do think the last few seconds of that clip have been taken out of context, the rest of this segment speaks to you. Everyone watch, okay? But it's directed to those people. And before I go through a bunch of stuff for you, actually, here's Jen Psaki yesterday.
We're planning to start the show on all of the delays on the legal cases, and there are a lot. And we will spend time on that with two of your absolute favorite legal experts in just a little bit. But then, late yesterday afternoon, Donald Trump spoke at a rally in Ohio, and we decided we have to start here.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. Now, the Trump team quickly said last night, nothing to see here. He was just talking about the auto industry. Consider the full context, everyone, otherwise it's irresponsible. Well, if they want us to consider the full context, let's do just that. Because the full context is that Trump kicked off this same exact rally by saluting the people who were convicted for the deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, all to the tune of the national anthem sung by a choir of imprisoned insurrectionists. The full context is that some of the first words out of Trump's mouth last night, same rally, were thanking those rioters and calling them patriots. The full context is that he also said in this same rally, quote, "If this election isn't won, I'm not sure that you'll ever have another election in this country." The full context is that he went on to say some undocumented immigrants are, quote, "not people." And of course, the full context is that this is much bigger than one single speech.
Exactly right. Now, for all of you who haven't seen the online debate over this, let me summarize again. Mainstream media says Trump threatens bloodbath if not elected. MAGA says that was taken out of context. And more importantly, I saw social media posts after social media posts from right-wingers pointing to this video and media reporting on it as proof that all the narratives you hear about Trump are bogus. They insisted that this is the quintessential example of how Trump is so wronged by the media and portrayed to be something that he's not. And it's why I wanted to include a bunch of context at the beginning of the segment in that clip. Nothing needs to be taken out of context to believe Trump should never get close to the White House again. And so to all the people right now who feel like this clip being reported on affirms some belief that you have that Trump isn't as bad as we say he is, hear me out on the rest of this. Because I'm willing to assume, again, as I said earlier, if for no other reason than using it as a thought experiment, that you're completely correct on that clip. You win. Let's assume it. Totally out of context, horrible. We're all so aggravated, the media, for that. Okay. Still the more important issue and discussion and what we should be spending our time talking about, it's not debating on whether or not that was in context, out of context, but debating why on earth you would support Trump fully contextualized. So here's what is definitely 100% in context. And by the way, I'm addressing this to people who still support Trump. I know most likely they aren't watching. I get people when I do these sorts of segments in the comments saying, why are you talking like that? They're not watching your show. It's just a way to format an important conversation, okay? Here we go. In context, Donald Trump called for the termination of the Constitution on Truth Social. A massive fraud of this type magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. He wrote, said the government should come down hard on them, referring to the media, and will pay a big price for their vicious coverage of him, and recently referred to the press as criminals at a speech. In 2020 and 2021, Trump coordinated and implemented an attempt for the first time in American history to block the peaceful transfer of power. He attempted to do so through allegedly illegal means, according to prosecutors, such as the fake elector scheme, a plan put together that got Republican operatives, many of whom have since been indicted for this, to sign fraudulent forms claiming they were the duly elected and lawful electors of a state. They definitely weren't. And then engaged in a pressure campaign to convince state governments to throw out their lawful electors and certify pro-Trump ones, claiming Trump won when he didn't. When that didn't work, you might remember, they pressured Mike Pence to reject the lawful electoral count and claim that unlawful electors represented states that they didn't. A move that would have given justification to Trump, in his mind, to stay in power and prevent Biden from assuming his lawful position. Luckily, Mike Pence did decline, citing, what was that thing that Mike Pence cited as to what? Oh, the Constitution. And in response, Trump incited a mob to attack the Capitol with rioters chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Because I want to keep this segment moving on, I don't have time to discuss more in depth the attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power, the phone calls to state speakers of the House or secretaries of state from Trump and his allies pressuring them to call special sessions to overturn the results or fraudulently find votes that don't exist, or how allies of Trump illegally breach voting sites with the help of a pro-Trump election official. We won't get into the dozens of Trump allies who have been indicted for the role they played in an allegedly illegal attempt to disenfranchise millions of voters and undemocratically install Trump as president for another 4 years. We won't dive into the details of the 2 election-related indictments brought against Trump that lay out in detail how Trump publicly and privately attempted to dissolve the belief starting well before the election in our electoral process to justify subverting the will of the people and staying in power. We won't discuss the text sent to Trump's chief of staff from a Republican Congressman, Ralph Norman, or the wife of a Supreme Court justice, encouraging Meadows to invoke martial or to encourage Trump to invoke martial law, which would be seizing military control of the government 3 days before Biden's inauguration, or from Ginny Thomas pushing Dominion machine conspiratorial nonsense. We don't have time for the hours of conversations that we could discuss about that attempt. So let's move on to some other in context elements of Trump. Donald Trump was found to have sexually abused and defamed E. Jean Carroll in 2 civil trials in front of juries. This comes after he was caught on a hot mic bragging about sexually assaulting women. He said that if his daughter weren't his daughter, he'd be dating her, agreed she's a, quote, piece of ass, end quote, said they have sex in common, among other vile remarks. And according to an ex-staffer, while he was president, discussed what it might be like to have sex with her. He repeatedly says that migrants are poisoning the blood of our country, something that echoes rhetoric of Hitler in a disturbing fashion. Has said that shoplifters should be shot in the back on their way out of a store, received millions of dollars while he was president from foreign governments through his businesses, was found liable for fraud in the state of New York, said he'd encourage Putin to attack a NATO ally if they aren't bang enough, compared his perceived persecution to that of Alexei Navalny, mismanaged a global pandemic, contradicted his public health officials, and speculated about bleach and UV light in the body curing COVID. And former Trump administration official after former Trump administration official, I'm getting tired, is not supporting him in this candidacy. Mike Pence, Bill Barr, James Mattis, Mark Esper, Rex Tillerson, H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, John Kelly, Anthony Scaramucci, Stephanie Grisham, Michael Cohen, Ty Cobb, Alyssa Farrah Griffin, Sarah Matthews, Cassidy Hutchinson, and it goes on. And I'll note that many of those people describe Trump as a threat to democracy. They worked alongside him. Now many of them think he could quite literally end American democracy as we know it. Continuing, he strangely salivated over Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and Vladimir Putin, speaking more highly of them than any leaders of allied countries. Discussed using a nuclear weapon against a hurricane. His former chief of staff, General John Kelly, heard him call fallen soldiers suckers and losers for giving their life for the country, and he also didn't want to be seen with wounded soldiers. Kelly also heard Trump say Hitler did some good things, despite claiming that the border is one of his top issues and using the vile language, as we said, about human beings, and that's justified because of his stance on the border. He encouraged his allies in Congress to kill a deal that would have addressed issues at the southern border, written by a conservative senator and endorsed aggressively by the Border Patrol Union. This caused a situation where, despite his rhetoric on fentanyl, state-of-the-art scanners that would detect fentanyl being smuggled into the U.S. are currently going unused because Border Patrol doesn't have the funds to install them, something the Border Patrol would have gotten access to if the bill had gotten through. More people are dying due to fentanyl overdoses in the meanwhile because of that. And again, for the sake of time, I'll stop the list there, but we could go on. Impeached twice, indicted 4 times. Okay, you get the point. Let's stop there. So I have to say, MAGA, the question is not whether or not he was taken out of the context about the bloodbath remark specifically. The question is why on earth you support him with all of the context. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you want to get the daily bonus show and support the show, you can go to lukebeaslyshow.com/membership. And I got some people asking, they saw me wearing my little Luke Beasley Show shirt the other day, and they asked about merch. You can get merch at lukebeasleymerch.com.